Good morning. Thank you for joining me this morning. My name is Matt Cruger. I'm a clinical neuropsychologist at the Child Mind Institute. To meet the unprecedented mental health and parenting needs of this coronavirus crisis, the Child Mind Institute has gone borderless. We're here with gold standard clinical care, advice, and resources for children and families wherever you are, all online and accessible to everyone. Here's what we can do to support you during this crisis. We're providing gold standard mental health care remotely for new and existing patients with telehealth while maintaining the same high quality care. We have free comprehensive resources for families at childmind.org/coronavirus. You can sign up for daily parenting tips at childmind.org. And on Facebook, my colleagues and I are answering your questions just like this at 10 a.m. and 4:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Monday through Friday. We also have a Facebook group for parenting during the time of coronavirus, and it's up and running. We're here for you wherever you are. Please contact us for further questions about how we can help, and I hope that you'll take advantage of our resources and share them with your networks. Today we're going to be discussing school and how to schedule schoolwork at home. I'm going to do my best to answer all your questions on this topic and others, but if I run out of time, there are two ways you can get what you need. We'll be right back here at 4:30 p.m. this afternoon, at 10 a.m. tomorrow to answer more questions, and we'll have a team looking through your questions daily, and they will incorporate answers into our resources on childmind.org. I guess I would start by thinking about how to schedule schoolwork at home by my own experiences. I have a third grader and a kindergarten, and the remote school experience took my wife and I by storm. It was challenging to figure out how to manage the demands of continuing to work and suddenly having our kids at home with us to try to stay on top of their schoolwork. I'm satisfied that my school district has done a lot for me to help provide online classrooms for my children, though I have heard reports that districts are doing different things and schools are doing different things. So some kids go home with packets of information, and other kids like mine have activities that are being shared remotely online with teachers providing videos and some content to manage. So there could be many different ways that you in the audience have been having to cope with the present demands. I still think one of the most important things is for us to schedule our day as if we were in school. And I think our children benefit from having structures and routines, regularity that they can count on. So we are still doing waking up in the morning, getting dressed and getting ready. We might end up adding a pajama day at home sometime soon, but we haven't done it yet. We're making sure our children follow through with those same typical morning routines. We actually have also had a morning meeting every morning where all four of us sit down and try to review the calendar and think about what the day is going to be like. And then we sit down to sign into our courses or classes remotely. Because my daughter's in third grade, she's able to work more independently, but my son, who's in kindergarten, really does need a partner to sit with him the whole day. And that was one of the things that was hard to manage in the beginning, that we have to be present with our kids and also sort of teach them how to use the computers to access their classroom content. We do take a lunch and recess break. We try to go outside during that time. And in the afternoon, we have ended up working at a slower pace and sometimes needing a few more breaks. We've been doing dinner together regularly, and we try to go outside and play, or when it was rainy, to stay inside and play. My wife and I have tried to switch our schedules so that she is one day with the kids and I'm one day at work, and then we go back and forth to try to make that work better. And that's something that's worked well for us, although obviously that depends on what parents can manage to do. One of the other things that I have used pretty regularly, and my wife has as well, is to monitor our children's work and to use rewards and reinforcement as incentive for following through with things. And I think it's a strategy that teachers have been using and probably should be incorporated at home. To expect our kids to get through this tough time, we have to help them feel incentivized to do work. And so I think one of the best ways to do that is to pay attention to what they're doing and to make sure that we use reinforcement to help them stay on task and get things done. Children who are in third grade and up probably can work independently, and that parents could have more of a style of monitoring their work where they check back at them to see how well they have progressed and what they've done, and then to give them praise and to check with them. Maybe one other idea is to ask them to let you know when they need your support and help so that you can be called to get involved at the times when they need you the most. For younger kids who are third grade and younger, parents have to be much more close monitoring and sitting nearby their students as they're getting them to do work and get activities done. One simplest form of, or most simplest but maybe most meaningful form of reinforcement is using praise. And so one of the best ways we can motivate our children to do well, because they really do prefer our attention and they do prefer us to praise them, is to make sure that we see what they're doing and give them very specific praise about the actions that they took. So I would say something more like, I'm really proud of you for figuring out how to do that activity, or I'm really glad that you tried your hardest while you were working, as opposed to more general statements like good job or attaboy. Those things don't work quite as well to motivate our kids and help them realize we're really thrilled and satisfied about what they've done. Probably as I was saying it, I didn't come across as enthusiastic as I might when I'm with my son or with my daughter. And that's one of the things that parents should really try to regulate as well, using an enthusiastic tone when they deliver praise, because it makes the praise much better. And small things like treats or desserts or some screen time could be used as a reinforcement to help our kids stay active and involved in their schoolwork. Though you should use those slightly more sparingly and in relation to the work that they're doing. So maybe 15 minutes of video game is a good reward after working productively for the morning, a routine. We don't want our kids to get too distracted by those things that they find highly rewarding, but to use it as an incentive. One of the questions that's coming in is a question that makes a lot of sense to me. The person who wrote this question says, do you recommend any sort of boosting or extracurricular program to keep kids on track? And they said that they're worried that they'll be months behind and school will never be the same. I think one of the things that I've struggled with as well is figuring out, when is school going to go back to normal, or how will it go back to normal? And so that makes a lot of sense to me. I just don't know the answer to that. In some ways, I'm worrying or thinking that we might be still here at home doing work until the end of the school year. And so I'm sort of in my mind preparing for that. I don't know how much I want to focus on my worries. I guess I'm doing a mixture of worrying about things and then trying to calm myself down and talk myself through and develop sort of a reasonable perspective on what our kids could accomplish. The extracurricular program or booster programs are very hard for me to recommend because I don't have one in mind that was going to address the needs of most kids. So my answer to that question is a sort of a mixed bag. I think it really is, what are the things that we're asking kids to do most of all? So in kindergarten to third grade, the curricular demands at school are really about reading, basic reading skills, developing decoding strategies so you can sound out words, and using writing to start to communicate our ideas without high demands on how perfect the writing is, So spelling mistakes and grammar mistakes, those are okay and those are acceptable. Good development of some basic math facts and math thinking is also very important, and understanding some of the rules for math ideas are important in kindergarten through third grade. To me, that's the time most when we want to be available to help our kids learn those demands so that they can develop some basics and fundamentals. Reading with your child, having them practice sounding out, making that a pleasurable experience where you put your arm around your son or daughter and they can cuddle with you while you're reading, taking some turns, reading one page versus another, and practicing some basic skills for decoding would be extremely helpful for a student in the kindergarten through third grade age range. Those would be a good idea. And then just writing, simply journaling ideas. Writing to dictation when you ask them to write a sentence, sitting down and trying to write a story for a longer expression. Those are really important skills to work on, but they're sort of reading and writing basics. There probably are curriculums that some districts are providing, and there are resources that we could post later on in the comment about some of the tools we might use during those early phases. But I can't think of a specific extracurricular program to recommend for all students, but it's basics and fundamentals that are important there. In fourth to sixth grade, I think having students work on mastery, developing greater and greater capacity for reading, writing, and math, and studying history, studying science facts, and working more independently is important. And from 7th to 12th grade, we want our students to be doing more of a deep study and learning new methods for dealing with complexity, developing essay writing skills, really honing their comprehension of material that they're reading. And so those are sort of higher level demands and many times require thinking about the process of learning in a way that they haven't before. I have another question here that says, thank you for doing this. I'm glad I'm doing this. I have a 2 and 3-year-old. I've been trying to be open with them, and it has been difficult. Can you give me some insight about the best way to explain the situation to them, particularly about why we can't go anywhere? So one of the rules of thumb for talking to very young children is to try to explain things in few words, but to be direct and honest. And so I think that you can count on your kids to ask you more questions if they have things that don't make sense or don't add up for them. So for a 2nd and a 3rd-year-old, I think that they would probably respond very favorably, focusing on one of the main things that's happening, which is that we are spending more time together as a family. So that's probably where I'd start. I'd start by telling them that right now is a time when mommy and daddy people are staying home with their kids. Parents are staying home with their children. So I would probably say something to that effect, that right now we're staying home all together as a family, and we're trying to make sure that we keep ourselves safe from people getting sick. If they have more questions, they'll ask you about that. But I would try to spend some time outside if that's possible, if you could go for walks, but also to make sure that they understand it's a time when we can't really interact with other people quite as much. But I keep your explanations very brief, use only a couple words, and don't share a lot more information than your kids are asking for. If they do wonder about things, they will ask you. Someone writes, do you have any specific advice for children who have ADHD and ASD, autism spectrum disorder, and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder? The person wrote, my son is 8. So I do think that children with special needs are going to be have some more struggles during this time frame. So the typical student who has attention deficit hyperactivity disorder is going to show slightly more struggles staying involved in work for prolonged time frames. They might show more hyperactive and restless behaviors, although at age 8, that might change, so it depends on the student. In my office, when I have students in that age range who have ADHD, I'm often spending some time trying to get them involved and trying to prolong the amount of time they're engaged in an activity. You may have to break down tasks into smaller steps. That might be a very important first step. I think you might have to pick and choose your battles about what behaviors your son engages in that you might have spent some time talking about in the past, but maybe it's not as worthwhile to do now. So I wouldn't be too focused on pointing out moments when he's standing up at the desk and working. As long as he's working, I'd focus on him being engaged in some activity, productive activity, and I'd be incentivizing that. One of the best tools that we have, again, as I mentioned before, for keeping our students involved in tasks and our kids involved in tasks is to use attention and praise. So I would certainly want to use more attention and give my child more attention when they're doing the things that I ask them to do, and withdrawing some of that attention or actively ignoring misbehavior if they engage in misbehavior. And I certainly will look for every moment that I can find to praise a child who is struggling through things. My son has been saying to me, this is boring. And I agree with that. I think that this is a very big change to be at home doing work at a desk as opposed to being in your classroom where you get to walk around and talk to friends more, and that the routines are very different. So I want to praise my son every time he sits down and does work. And I do want to acknowledge, yes, sometimes that this activity can be boring. So I would use praise and reinforcement liberally. I do think that we want to minimize conflict with our children during this time frame. It's not the time to really try to get into fights. So taking a break, calling a timeout, saying let's do a stop action and come back to activities at a later point, I think that would be helpful for students. And then having them pick activities that they find interesting might also be helpful. So one way to think about structuring the day is maybe there's an activity that's interesting versus an activity that's less interesting. I'm going to highlight that some of the things that I've been doing with my children I think are designed to be more adventurous or more exciting. So just reading a list of sight words for 10 minutes, that's not a very joyful engagement. And maybe it could be done at different times, but I've been having my son do jumping jack math facts. So every time he gets a math fact right, he does a jumping jack for me, or we do a jumping jack together. I've been having my children son do sight word bowling. So I put some plastic bowling pins up and I have him roll the ball down to knock down a bowling pin, and the bowling pin has a sight word on a post-it for it. So some activities that are more active might engage some students in a more effective way and be more exciting. And use, again, your attention to keep your children motivated and involved. Someone here wrote, my child says he's not good at learning all online. What can I do? I try to make sure that your son first realizes that probably we're not all very good at learning online. So this is not really the way that learning was conceived of when we first thought about developing classrooms for kids. So I think you could start with some acknowledgement to your child that learning online is a more challenging thing, but that we're trying to do our best to make it work out as best as possible, and that there are things that probably he does in the classroom or she does in the classroom that we can also do at home. I try to make whatever is online much more accessible in front of them. So so learning is not just about mastering content, but it's about learning processes of working. And so doing something online that has been recommended maybe needs to be converted to an activity that's a desktop activity, and have your child really focus on that all of the stuff that's being taken from online learning situations into a desktop situation is helpful. So printing out activities or moving around the house to different spots where you find a good place to work, where you don't have to be tied to the computer. Those all are things that could be done. And I think that one important thing when I work with kids is to help them develop their own mindset for learning. So we are all different kinds of learners, and there are vast differences in how one person learns versus another. So you might end up thinking about trying to have your son develop a mindset of what are his tools and assets for learning, or your child, what are their tools and assets for learning? What do they do best when they're trying to learn new information? And what are the ways that they learn that are more challenging for them? What are the things that are harder? So some people are describe themselves as kinesthetic learners. They have to walk around in order to think about their ideas. I'm more of a linguistic learner. I like to sit down and study information in a very disciplined way. But some people can't do that. And so helping your child learn more about themselves as a learner, it might be an opportunity for more of a conversation. And I would try to get them out of the mindset of developing strict or rigid ideas about who they are as learners that are negative. All of us have the capacity to learn. Sometimes the learning environment doesn't work well for us. Someone wrote here, how much should I talk to my child about what's going on with COVID-19? This person didn't state the age of the child. Again, I think very young children probably need us to share with them the very simple and basic facts in a very direct way. So I probably would say to a younger child, there is a sickness. We're trying to stay home to make sure that that we don't get sick ourselves, and we're spending less time with others in order to keep ourselves safe. And leave it at that unless they ask more questions. If they ask more questions, again, the answers you give should be direct and clear, and try not to focus on worry and uncertainty, which are things that young children don't cope with well. We all don't cope with it well, but we want to sort of make sure that we don't lead our kids to excessive worry by not being direct with them. Older kids could learn more direct information about the virus, and you could feel comfortable telling them details and facts about it, though I think the effort should focus again on what are the things that they can do to make sure that they stay safe and that they present themselves from getting sick. I might think of highlighting for sure that we want to wash our hands, that we want to make sure that we, as we were saying, don't touch our face, that social distancing is a standard and method that we're using to try to eliminate the chance to get sick. And that's also leading us to spend less time in contact with other people, even though we would love to be around others. Those are, I think, important, the important major messages to share with kids. And that there are things that we can continue to do at home that make our life similar to what it was before COVID-19. And then we're going to try to focus on those activities. Okay. I guess I would share one last thing, which is that my son and I have been developing checklists of the day. So we use a morning routine to write it out, and every day we have this to look at and sit down to make sure that he knows there's a routine for the day, and that we're working through our list, and that we're checking everything off as we go. Okay. I want to thank you all again for joining me this morning. I hope that it was helpful. I want to remind you that we'll be back here again at 4:30 this afternoon to answer more questions. The Child Mind Institute is here to help with mental health and parenting needs of this coronavirus crisis, no matter where you are. We have resources to help, from daily tips to consultations to gold standard telehealth treatments. And you can go to childmind.org at coronavirus.